My brother always said my night delivery gig was a joke. He'd lean against the kitchen counter, arms crossed, smirking every time I grabbed my keys after sunset. "You're wasting your life," he'd say. "Running around in the dark for tips? Come on, man." And maybe part of me believed him. Maybe that's why I never looked him in the eyes when I left the house at 10 and 17 p.m., wearing the same worn jacket, carrying the same beat-up delivery bag, driving across town while everyone else was asleep. But what he didn't know, what no one knew, was that one night, one address, one stop on my route would flip everything I thought I understood about my life. I didn't see it coming. I didn't know that behind a quiet porch light and an unlabeled envelope was an opportunity worth more than every paycheck I had ever earned combined. And I sure didn't know that the moment I stepped on that porch, my future and my brother's laughter would change forever. I never imagined that driving around making deliveries at night would become the turning point of my entire life. Back then, it was just survival. I needed extra money, and night delivery was the only thing that fit my schedule. The silence of the empty streets, the glow of street lights, the hum of my old car, I learned to live with all of it. I learned to ignore the comments too, especially from my brother. He always acted like he was above that kind of work, like anything done after midnight didn't count as real effort. Still, every night I showed up, mile after mile, order after order, doing what I had to do. I didn't know that one stop, just one, would rewrite everything. If you're listening to this, take a second to subscribe to the channel, because stories like this, they don't just entertain. They remind us how fast life can turn when you push through the doubt. And this story, this one starts on a Wednesday night, a little past 11:42 p.m., when my phone buzzed with a delivery request that looked like any other, but wasn't. It was a Wednesday night, the kind of night when the world feels half asleep and the air sits heavy on your skin. I remember checking my phone as I walked out the door, my brother lounging on the couch like he had nothing better to do. "Night delivery again," he said with that same slow grin he'd perfected over the years. "Man, you really don't value your time." I didn't respond. I'd learned that answering only made the comments stick longer in my head. So I just grabbed my keys, tightened my jacket, and stepped outside into the cold. My car, old enough to complain every time I turned the ignition, groaned awake as I started the engine. The dashboard lights flickered, that familiar reminder that the car needed repairs I couldn't afford. The night smelled like rain, even though the sky was clear. It was quiet. Too quiet for someone who wasn't used to loneliness. But I had become comfortable with it. I drove through the same neighborhoods I'd driven through hundreds of times, listening to the soft hum of the tires against the road. Delivery work at night is strange. You see people at their most unguarded moments. A man arguing on the phone in his driveway. A woman sitting by the window eating alone. A kid asleep on the couch with the TV still on. Pieces of life that don't belong to you but pass through your world for just a minute or two. Around 11:42, my phone buzzed with a new order. It looked normal. Address, name, standard delivery fee. Nothing special. The only thing different was a note attached at the bottom. "Please knock quietly." Simple, but unusual. Most people didn't care how loud the knock was. Some even wanted the doorbell rung twice. I accepted the order and drove toward the location. As I headed down the long road leading out of the busier part of town, traffic grew thinner and houses farther apart. The streets were darker too, just small pockets of yellow light from old porch lamps. My GPS guided me into a neighborhood I'd never delivered to before. The houses were bigger than the ones I was used to, spaced out with wide lawns, the kind of places where people didn't worry about money. I pulled up to the address, a two-story home with a soft glow coming from the living room window. The porch light was on, but dim, almost like it was intentionally low. I parked, grabbed the order bag, and walked up the driveway. Every step felt heavier than normal, and I didn't know why. Maybe it was the quiet, or the way the shadows pooled in corners of the yard. Maybe it was just exhaustion settling into my bones. I reached the porch and lifted my hand to knock softly, exactly as requested. Before my knuckles touched the door, it opened. A man stood there, middle-aged, dressed in dark slacks and a sweater, with the kind of expression that was calm but observant. He looked at me like he was studying something familiar. "You're earlier than I expected," he said.
His voice wasn't warm, but it wasn't cold either. Controlled, neutral. "Traffic was light tonight," I answered, handing him the bag. He didn't take it immediately. Instead, he looked at my face for a few seconds longer than normal, his eyes narrowing slightly like he was placing a memory. "What's your name?" My heart thumped once, hard. Normally, no one asked that. I hesitated, then answered, "Daniel." The man's expression didn't change, but something about his posture shifted. Barely noticeable unless you were paying attention. "Daniel," he repeated softly, like he was testing how the name felt in his mouth. Finally, he reached out and took the bag. "Wait here a moment," he said. "I have something for you." That sentence sent a small jolt down my spine. It wasn't uncommon for someone to give a cash tip, but they usually brought it to the door quickly. This man stepped away from the entrance, disappearing deeper into the house. I stood there, feeling the night press against my skin. The air felt colder as seconds passed. I looked out over the empty street, listening to the quiet hum of my car still running. When the man returned, he wasn't holding money. He had an envelope, thick, sealed, and unmarked. He extended it toward me. "This is for you," he said. "Open it when you're home." My fingers twitched as I reached for it. The weight of the envelope felt unusual, heavier than paper money, firmer than a card. "What is it?" He gave a quick, almost imperceptible smile. A different kind of opportunity. My heartbeat stumbled. "Why me?" He watched me for a long moment before answering. "Because I recognize you from a contract I read a long time ago." My breath hitched. "A contract? For what?" But he didn't answer. Instead, he nodded once. "Drive safe, Daniel." Then he closed the door, softly. No slam, no rush, just a quiet click. I stood there frozen for at least 10 seconds, staring at the door like it was going to swing open again with an explanation. It didn't. When I finally walked back to my car, my legs felt unsteady. I kept glancing at the envelope as if it were pulsing with heat. A long, deep instinct inside me whispered that this night was not normal, that this man was not random, that this stop, this single delivery, was the start of something I wasn't prepared for. I drove home in silence, gripping the steering wheel harder than I meant to, my mind spinning in circles. Why did he recognize me? What contract? What opportunity? I didn't have any answers, but I had the envelope. And somewhere between the dark roads and the low hum of my engine, I realized the truth. Whatever was inside it was going to change everything. And my brother? He'd never laughed the same way again. When I finally pulled into the driveway, the house was dark, except for the faint blue glow of the TV leaking through the living room curtains. My brother was probably still awake, probably scrolling on his phone or watching some show he'd already seen a dozen times. Normally, I'd head straight to my room after a shift, avoiding conversation, avoiding the smirk he always wore when I came home late. But that night, the envelope felt like it was burning a hole in my jacket pocket, demanding my attention with every breath I took. I stepped inside quietly and locked the door behind me. My brother glanced at me from the couch, barely lifting his chin. "Another glamorous night?" he said. He expected me to shrug, laugh awkwardly, brush it off like I always did, but I just stared at him for a moment. Not angry, just different. He frowned. "What?" I shook my head and walked past him before he could say anything else. Once inside, I closed the door, sat on the edge of my bed, and pulled out the envelope. For a long time, I just stared at it. Plain white, no markings, no name. But the thickness of it, the weight, it felt intentional, like someone had filled it with purpose, not paper. My hands felt cold as I ripped it open. Inside was a single folded document and a card. I pulled the card out first. It was a business card, black, with raised silver letters. Evan Carter, Executive Director, Carter Innovations. I didn't know the name, but the logo was something I had seen before, a long time ago, back when I still believed my life would go in a different direction. My chest tightened and I unfolded the document. The first line nearly knocked the air out of me. My throat went dry. I read it again, slower this time. I knew exactly what that meant, because 11 years ago, I had submitted a design to a company's open talent program, just one among thousands of hopeful creators who thought they had something special. I remembered staying up night after night working on it, believing it was my shot at something bigger. And then nothing. No response, no rejection, just silence. Life happened after that. Bills piled up, dreams faded into responsibilities. My submission turned into a story I didn't tell anymore. But as I read the letter in my hands, my heart pounded like it hadn't in years. Your submission has been identified as eligible for review toward prototype development and potential acquisition. My vision blurred for a second. I blinked hard. At the bottom of the page was a handwritten note. Not typed, handwritten. Daniel, I recognized you the moment I saw you at my door tonight. You haven't changed as much as you think you have. I meant what I said. This is an opportunity. Don't waste it. Evan. I sat there staring at those words, trying to process them. How could he recognize me? Why now? Why after all this time? I tried to remember the old submission, the long nights sketching ideas, the excitement that made me feel alive, and then the disappointment that followed. I had buried that version of myself years ago, convinced it didn't matter anymore. But suddenly, it did. It mattered more than anything in my life at that moment. My chest tightened with a mixture of hope, fear, and disbelief. I read the letter again and again. Each time the words felt more real. My hands were shaking when I finally set aside the papers. I leaned back on my bed, staring at the ceiling, my heart racing. That's when I heard a soft knock on my door. "Hey," my brother said from the hallway. "You good?" My whole life, he never asked me that, not once, but I didn't have the energy to answer him. "Yeah, I'm fine." "You sure? You look weird." "Just tired." He hesitated. I could hear him shifting his weight, unsure whether to leave or push further. "All right," he finally said. "Good night, man." When the hallway went silent again, I exhaled slowly. I stayed awake for hours, reading the letter until the paper felt warm from my hands. I didn't know what the next step was, or whether this opportunity was real, or whether I'd wake up in the morning and find out it was all some strange mistake. But one thing was clear. My life had just tilted. Slightly, but unmistakably. And sometimes that tilt becomes the start of an avalanche. I finally fell asleep sometime after 3:09 the manhã, the document resting on my nightstand like a small, silent promise. The next morning, I woke to sunlight cutting across my face and the sound of my brother making breakfast in the kitchen. Normally, the smell of burnt toast would annoy me, but this morning, it made my chest feel warm in a strange way. For the first time in years, I had something to look forward to. I jumped in the shower, got dressed, and sat at my desk with the business card in my hand. I memorized the name again. Evan Carter, Executive Director. A man who recognized me after more than a decade. A man who handed me an opportunity on a quiet porch in the middle of the night. My fingers hovered over my phone for a long moment. I didn't know what to say or how to start. I had never been good at making calls that mattered, but I dialed the number anyway. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Then a voice answered. Calm, steady, familiar. "Daniel, I was expecting you." My heart hammered inside my chest. Everything in my life, every long night, every delivery shift, every small humiliation, every moment I felt invisible, pulled together into this one point. "I got your letter. I want to know more." "Good. Then let's begin."
When he said, "Then let's begin," something shifted inside me. Like the ground had moved an inch to the left and my body hadn't realized it yet. His voice sounded exactly the same as the night before. Steady, controlled, confident, in a way that made me straighten my back even though he couldn't see me. "Do you remember the concept you submitted?" he asked. My breath caught because I hadn't thought about that design in so long that it felt like remembering a childhood dream. "Sort of," I said. "Parts of it. Not everything." "That's fine," he replied. "I remember all of it." Those words hit harder than I expected. He remembered something I created 11 years ago. Something the world ignored, something even I let slip out of my own memory. "Why now?" I asked. "Why reopen the review after all this time?"
There was a pause on the line. Not awkward, intentional. Because your design wasn't rejected, he said. It was lost. My heart thudded once. Hard. Lost? Our company went through restructuring around that time. Departments merged, projects got shelved, files were moved, and unfortunately, several promising submissions were misplaced. Yours was one of them. I leaned back in my chair, pressing a hand against my forehead as the pieces of my past rearranged themselves. All those nights believing I wasn't good enough, all the disappointment, all the shame I carried silently. And the whole time, it wasn't even rejected. It just never reached the right hands. I found it by accident a few months ago. When I opened it, I recognized its potential immediately. And last night when I saw you, I recognized your face from the old application file. I swallowed hard. You're telling me this is real? Not some pity project? His voice sharpened slightly. I don't deal in pity, Daniel. If your work wasn't valuable, we wouldn't be having this conversation. My breath steadied. For the first time, I allowed myself to feel something close to belief. So what happens now? I asked. Now, he said, we see if you're still the person who created that design. We set a meeting. You bring updated sketches, fresh ideas, anything you've been holding on to all these years, and we decide if you're ready to rebuild what you lost. My stomach flipped. I don't know if I have anything ready. Then get ready, he said simply. I'll send you a date and time. Don't be late. The line clicked and he was gone. I stared at my phone like it had just delivered news from another universe. A meeting, updated sketches, fresh ideas. I hadn't drawn anything in years, not seriously, not with purpose. But something inside me, something I thought had died, sparked awake. I opened my closet and pulled out an old box I hadn't touched in forever. Dust coated the top. My name was written in faded marker. Inside were old notebooks, loose sheets, worn pencils, and the original folder from the project submission I'd made as a younger, hungrier version of myself. My fingers trembled as I picked up the sketches. Lines, shapes, concepts, ideas overflowing with ambition. I could see the younger me in every pencil stroke, hopeful, driven, believing he could build something that mattered. I felt a lump grow in my throat. I had forgotten this version of myself. Or maybe I had buried him so deep under the weight of life that I assumed he'd never resurface. I grabbed a pencil and sat down at my desk. My hand hovered over the paper for a long moment. Then slowly, shakily at first, I began to draw. Hours passed without me noticing. My room grew darker until the only light came from the lamp on my desk. My brother knocked once, asking if I wanted dinner. I told him I wasn't hungry. He didn't push. I kept drawing. Ideas spilled out like they had been waiting years to breathe. I redesigned angles, improved functions, added details I never could have imagined back then. The world had changed, and so had I. By the time I stopped, it was almost 4:27 in the morning. My hand was cramped, my eyes burned, but for the first time in a long time, I felt alive. Truly alive. I leaned back, staring at the new sketches scattered across my desk. They weren't perfect, but they were real. They were mine. And they were ready. I fell asleep without meaning to, slumped over my desk with papers still under my arm. When I woke up, sunlight was streaming through the window, warming the side of my face. My phone buzzed. A message. From Evan. Monday, 9 sharp. Conference room 3. Bring everything. My stomach twisted. Not from fear, from anticipation. I got up, showered, put on the cleanest shirt I had, still not fancy, but not wrinkled, and packed the sketches into a proper portfolio. My brother walked into the hallway just as I was slipping my shoes on. He asked, "You heading to work?" His voice was different, curious, hesitant, like he already sensed something had changed. I said, "Not tonight. I've got a meeting." His eyebrows shot up. A meeting? For what? I hesitated. I could have explained everything. I could have told him about the contract, the lost submission, the envelope, the opportunity that found me in the middle of a quiet porch. But I wasn't ready. Not yet. It's important, I said simply. He stared at me for a long second, then nodded slowly. All right, good luck, man. That was the first time in years he'd said that to me. I stepped out the door feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Support. Even if it was small. The company's building looked even larger in daylight, towering and sleek with reflective glass panels catching the morning sun. I stood outside for a moment, heart pounding, taking a slow, steady breath before walking inside. The receptionist greeted me politely and directed me to the third-floor conference wing. Each step felt heavier than the last, not from fear, but from the weight of possibility. When I reached conference room 3, I could see Evan through the glass wall. He was seated at the table, reviewing something, his posture straight and focused. I pushed the door open. He looked up immediately. Right on time, he said. I nodded and took a seat across from him, setting the portfolio on the table. Are you ready? He asked. My throat tightened, but I managed to speak. Yeah, I'm ready. Good, he replied. Show me what you got. I opened the portfolio with hands that trembled only slightly. The future, whatever it was going to become, began the moment the first sketch slid across the table.
When I slid the first sketch toward Evan, the room felt like it shrank by half. He didn't touch the paper right away. He studied it from where he sat, eyes narrowing slightly in concentration, the kind of focus only someone used to evaluating talent could maintain. Then he finally reached forward and lifted the page. The moment he did, my throat tightened. I watched his eyes scan each line, each adjustment, each updated feature I had poured myself into overnight. He didn't react, not visibly. No nod, no smile, no frown. Just pure analysis. That silence stretched so long that I felt my palms grow damp against the table. When he finished the first sketch, he placed it down and lifted the second. Then the third. Then the fourth. By the time he reached the last one, my heartbeat was so loud in my ears that I barely heard him exhale. He placed the final sheet on the polished surface, aligned the corners with meticulous precision, and finally looked at me. You didn't just update the design, you evolved it. My lungs expanded with a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Is that good? His mouth curved very slightly, not quite a smile, but close enough to feel like sunlight breaking through clouds. It's impressive, he said. Relief washed over me so fast that my shoulders dropped. My entire body unclenched. For the first time in years, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't chasing a fantasy. Evan stood, motioned for me to follow, and led me down a hallway lined with glass offices. People inside typed, sketched, discussed plans with coworkers. There was a sense of purpose in the air, the hum of an environment where ideas weren't just imagined, they were built. I felt out of place walking there, like a delivery driver who had wandered into the wrong movie scene. But then I remembered, I had created something worth being seen. Evan opened the door to a large design lab, long tables covered with tools, screens, prototypes in various stages. Engineers were working quietly, their focus sharp. This, he said, is where I want to evaluate your work further. He motioned toward an open space on a long metal table. Set your sketches down. I did as he asked, laying each sheet gently, like placing pieces of myself in front of strangers. Evan called over 2 engineers, both older men with years of experience carved into their posture. They introduced themselves briefly, shook my hand, then leaned over the sketches. They didn't speak at first, just analyzed. One traced the outline of a concept with a fingertip. The other adjusted his glasses, studying the functional notes I'd scribbled in the margins. Then one of them said, "Who drew these?" Evan nodded toward me. The engineer blinked. "You?" "Yeah," I said quietly. last night." Both men exchanged a look I couldn't decipher. Then the second engineer said, "These are strong. Really strong." The room tilted slightly, not physically, but emotionally, like gravity had eased for a moment. Evan nodded again. "Prepare a prototype model," he told them. "Use his updated specs." They didn't hesitate. They got to work immediately, pulling tools, opening digital drafting software, discussing structure and load points with rapid technical language. My sketches, my once-forgotten ideas, were becoming something real right in front of me. I stood silently, overwhelmed, until Evan motioned for me to follow him again. We stepped out into the hallway. "You have potential, Daniel, more than you realize." My voice came out rough. "Why are you doing this for me?" He looked at me carefully, like he wanted to make sure the truth landed in the right place. "Because talent gets overlooked too often, and because you deserved this opportunity 11 years ago, I won't let you lose it twice." The words hit hard, not just because they were generous, but because they healed something in me I didn't even know was still broken. We returned to the conference room after some time. Evan reviewed the notes engineers were sending to his tablet. "They're impressed," he said without lifting his eyes. My heart pounded again. "Really?" "Yes. And so am I." He set the tablet down and folded his hands on the table. "Now we need to discuss what this means for you." I swallowed. "Okay." He said, "If our prototype performs as expected, we will move into the acquisition phase. That involves a licensing agreement, profit percentages, and long-term collaboration." My head swam. "What kind of numbers are we talking about?" Evan didn't sugarcoat it. His tone remained matter-of-fact. "If projections align with our estimation, your design could realistically bring in six-figure returns annually." My vision blurred for a brief second. "Annually?" "Yes." My fingers curled around the edge of the chair. I felt dizzy, not from fear, but from the sheer contrast between my present life and the one he was describing. One night delivering Taukai for tips, the next being told I might be signing a contract worth more than everything I had ever made in my entire life. I leaned back, staring at him. "This doesn't feel real." "It's real, but it's only the beginning." He slid a packet of papers toward me. Non-disclosure agreements, preliminary partnership outlines. My name was already typed on the header. He said, "Take these home. Read them carefully. This is not something you rush into. I want you to understand everything you're stepping into." I nodded, slowly. "Okay." "And Daniel," he added, his tone softer than before, "don't doubt yourself in this. You're here because you earned it." No one had said something like that to me. Maybe ever. I left the building with the packet tucked under my arm and my portfolio hugged to my chest. The sun felt warmer. The air felt lighter. Even the sound of traffic seemed different, almost rhythmic. As I walked toward my car, a realization hit me with such clarity that I stopped in my tracks. My brother, my family, everyone who laughed at me for my delivery job, didn't know anything about this version of my life. They didn't know what I was capable of. They didn't know who I was becoming. And when I walked through that door tonight, everything in our dynamic would shift. Not because I wanted revenge, not because I wanted to prove them wrong, but because I had finally proven myself right. I got into my car and placed the packet on the passenger seat. My hand shook as I gripped the wheel. But for the first time ever, the shaking came from adrenaline, not fear. I took a long breath, started the engine, and whispered to myself, "This is it. This is the night everything changes."
When I drove home that evening, the sky was turning a deep orange. The kind of sunset that feels almost symbolic, like the universe is drawing a line between what your life used to be and what it's about to become. I kept glancing at the packet of documents on the passenger seat. Each time my eyes drifted toward it, a quiet shiver ran through me. I had carried food in that seat, grocery bags, crumpled jackets, but never anything that felt like a future. When I pulled into the driveway, my brother was outside, leaning against the hood of his car. He looked up as I parked, arms crossed. Not mocking, not smirking this time, just watching. "You're home early," he said. I grabbed the packet from the seat, closed the door behind me, and walked toward him. Had a meeting, I said. He raised an eyebrow. A meeting? At night? Not tonight, I answered. This one was this morning. He studied me, confusion tightening his face. Since when do you have meetings? There was no irritation in his voice, no judgment, just genuine curiosity, which somehow made the moment even heavier. Since now, I said. I didn't hand him the documents. Not yet. I walked past him and went inside, feeling him follow a few steps behind, like he sensed something important was coming, but didn't know how to ask. Mom was at the kitchen table peeling apples, the faint smell of cinnamon in the air. When she saw me, she smiled, but the smile faded when she noticed the thick packet in my hands. "What's that?" she asked softly. I pulled out a chair, sat down, and placed the packet on the table like I was setting down a piece of glass. "Something happened last night," I said. My brother stepped closer, arms slowly uncrossing. Mom leaned forward. "What is it, Daniel?" My heart pounded, not from fear, but from the weight of everything I was finally able to say out loud. "I told you I had a delivery stop that felt strange," I began. My brother blinked. "What do you mean, strange?" "The guy recognized me, not from deliveries, from something I submitted 11 years ago." Mom tilted her head. My brother frowned. "Submitted?" he asked. "Like school?" I shook my head. "No, a design. Something I made back when I thought I was going to build things for a living." His eyebrows rose. "I didn't know you ever did that." "You never asked," I said. Not with anger, just truth. He swallowed. I continued. "The company lost my submission years ago, but the man who ordered that delivery found it in an old file and tracked it back to me." My brother laughed once, not mocking, just shocked. "Are you kidding me?" "No," I said. "And today they reviewed my updated work. Engineers, directors, they're building a prototype this week." My mother's hands went to her mouth. My brother stepped closer like he couldn't believe I was standing there, the same person he brushed off night after night. "This packet," I said, tapping the documents gently, "is the preliminary agreement. If the prototype works, it moves into licensing. And if licensing works," I hesitated, breath shaking, "I could be earning 6 figures a year in royalties." The room fell silent, utterly silent. Mom's eyes filled instantly. My brother took a step back, his jaw dropping. "6 figures?" he whispered. "You?" I met his eyes, not with pride, not with revenge, but with something simpler. "Yes," I said. "Me." Mom started crying quietly, wiping her tears with the back of her wrist. She reached out, grabbing my hand the way she used to when I was a kid. "I always knew you were meant for more. I always felt it." My brother sat down slowly in the chair across from me. He ran his hands over his face. "Man, I messed up," he said. "I made fun of you every night. I thought you were wasting your time, chasing something that wasn't going anywhere." "I know," I said gently. "But it's okay." His voice cracked. "No, it's not okay. I didn't know you were carrying something like this. I didn't know you had dreams like that." I looked at him for a long moment, letting the truth settle between us. I didn't stop having dreams. I just stopped telling people who laughed at him. His eyes watered, something I'd never seen from him. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I'm proud of you," he said. Finally, voice low and sincere. "Really proud." The words hit me harder than I expected. For years, I'd built a quiet armor around myself to soften the blow of his laughter. But hearing him say he was proud of me, it cracked something open in my chest. I nodded once, couldn't speak. Later that night, after they both went to bed, I sat alone at the kitchen table with the packet. The refrigerator hummed behind me. The clock ticked softly. Outside, a streetlight flickered. I flipped through page after page, legal language, financial projections, confidentiality agreements.
And somewhere between the 22nd and 23rd page, I realized something. This wasn't just a contract. It was a doorway. A doorway I once believed was permanently locked. And now, for reasons I still didn't fully understand, someone had handed me the key. When the prototype was completed 3 days later, I returned to the company. The engineers demonstrated the function, the movement, the structure, every detail more refined than I could have imagined. Evan watched quietly, arms folded, eyes scanning, analyzing. When they finished, he turned to me. "It works. Better than expected." My chest tightened. "So what now?" "Now," he said, walking toward me with a rare, full smile, "we begin the acquisition process." My knees almost buckled. We signed the initial agreement that afternoon. My signature looked strange next to the company's emblem. Small, but powerful. When I stepped out of the building, I didn't go straight home. I got into my car, closed the door, and sat there for a long time staring at my hands. The hands that once carried delivery bags for tips at 2 a.m. The hands that tightened a worn steering wheel while my brother joked about how pathetic my job was. The hands that almost gave up on creating anything meaningful. Now those same hands had signed a contract that would change my entire life. I breathed in slowly, letting the truth settle somewhere deep in my chest. My brother had laughed at my night delivery gig for years, but one stop, one address, one envelope had rewritten my future in a way none of us could have predicted. And now the laughter wasn't on me anymore. It was behind me. Far behind me. My life had moved forward, and it wasn't slowing down.